Okay, here we go. It's Friday, January 10th. We're going to recap college football playoff action from last night. We'll give final NFL picks for Wild Card Weekend. We're going to talk about the future of Vladdy Guerrero Jr., and we'll discuss a bunch of other things. This is the Early Game Podcast. Listen to the show in the mornings, on your commute, whenever and wherever, so you can be a part of today's sports conversations. Let's go. Okay, so last night, Notre Dame, Penn State, they got the Final Four college football playoff started. And I just want to say off the bat, so this is obviously the first year that we have the extended college football playoff. We have 10 teams instead of 4. I felt like the buildup of the first rounds of this tournament, the first 2 rounds being played, the added rounds, I actually felt like last night it contributed to the vibe of the game. I felt a little more, there felt like it was more at stake last night, and it felt like it was more earned based on the fact that both teams had already won in 2 previous rounds. And it just was a different feeling than past years in this game, in this Final Four, semifinal, playoff college football game. And the environment, and it was just from watching on TV, but the environment at that game also seemed heightened. It seemed like the fans were a little bit rowdier, and it seemed like the coverage, felt more like an actual playoff game. I haven't really felt like the past years of college football playoff games have necessarily felt like they were playoffs. They felt it felt like they kind of started too late into the process. And so I think that after the first year of the expanded playoff, I actually think it felt like a success last night. And last night was really when I felt it. Last night was when it felt like there was a difference from past seasons to this season. That being said, the game itself, a little bit uneventful until the end. It started out, it was 10-10 going into the fourth quarter. Jeremiah Love, he ran one in for Notre Dame to go up 17-10. The game was tied at 24 with 25 seconds left. Penn State had the ball, but Drew Allard threw a pick to Christian Gray. This is not an X's and O's podcast. I want to be very clear about that, and I will continue to be clear about that. But you're Drew Allard. You are moving to your left. You have your own ball at the 25-yard, and then you are moving to your left, but then you throw right. So you're moving away from where your body's taking you, right to the middle of the field. That throw was a horrible throw. It was a horrible decision, and it was a horrible throw. And he gets picked off. That one is going to hurt for a long time for him. Granted, it was a great catch by Christian Gray. Fantastic. He was able to hold on to the ball. It was a fantastic catch. But to throw that ball in that moment, at that spot in the field, in your own territory, that is a horrible decision. That was a horrible decision. And it cost them. Mitch Jeter hit the 41-yard field goal to seal it for the Fighting Irish, and they end up winning 27-24. And so Ohio State takes on Texas tonight, and the winner of that game will play Notre Dame for the championship. Good game last night. A little boring to start. Fun ending. But boy, that is going to haunt him. That throw was a horrible decision. That is exactly what they teach you not to do, if I'm not mistaken. I've never been taught how to be a quarterback. I've watched enough Dan Orlovsky videos to know that you do not do that, especially in that situation. You don't make a throw like that. Better to throw to the sideline, get out. If he felt like he didn't have a play, better to throw it away. That was just a horrible play. All right. Let's go on to the NFL. And the day started out yesterday that we got news that the Raiders, after initially being reported that they were going to only let go of Antonio Pierce and Tom Telesco was going to stay on, Tom Telesco gets fired by the Raiders yesterday. And one thing is clear. Tom Brady is running the show now. And I will say this. Do not be shocked if Tom Brady's stint as a broadcaster on Fox, along with Kevin Burkhardt, do not be shocked if that stint is a one and done. Do not be shocked if the Raiders decide they're going to hire a head coach, not hire a GM, and give Tom Brady some sort of title like team president or executive vice president or whatever you want to call him. But Tom Brady is going to be calling the shots for this Raiders team. He will. Is that smart? I personally don't think so. I made the argument the other day. Have people with executive experience making football decisions. Don't just decide that because Tom Brady is Tom Brady and he was a great quarterback, he is now all of a sudden going to be an amazing GM and he's going to be able to fix the Raiders' issues. Can it work? I guess so. I don't have any scenarios off the top of my head, but I can't think of any great GMs or decision makers in the NFL who, first crack at it without any sort of prior executive experience or experience running a team, I cannot think of an example of one that off the bat was successful. And if you want to kind of think through the scenario, what will happen? So say Tom Brady is not successful. Say I'm right. So he's an owner of the team, but he's not successful at running it. How's that going to work out? The Raiders draft 6th in the draft, and there's no clear path for them. It's not like there is a quarterback that they can take that will clearly turn the team around or that will at least give them a shot. There's no quarterback available out there, whether that's a free agent or that's in the draft. There's nobody who we can necessarily point to and say they can realistically get that player and that player can realistically turn them around. And frankly, I wonder if all that considered, this GM job, whoever will run the Raiders, I wonder if that's even considered a good job for the position that they're in. Now, maybe they will tank next season for Arch Manning the following season. Maybe they will tank this season because they don't like their quarterback options, and they will see what's available next offseason. But my gut tells me I do not like this for the Raiders. I do not like Tom Brady running their team. Okay, let's move on. So let's preview the last 2 games that we have left. I previewed the first 4 wildcard games for this weekend already. The last 2 shows, you can check those out. But let's move on to Commanders-Bucks. Commanders are the 6th seed, the Bucks are the 3 seed, and the line I see is Commanders -3. This is the Peacock game, so make sure when you start your free trial, you set a reminder to cancel. In this game, we get to see the best quarterback from this past season's rookie class get his first taste of playoff football. Jaden Daniels had the 4th highest QBR of a rookie ever with 100.1. His 981 rushing yards was the most ever for a rookie quarterback. Keep in mind, that includes all of the recent great mobile quarterbacks: Cam Newton, Lamar Jackson, RG3, Josh Allen. More than all of them. He is one of the best mobile quarterbacks we've ever seen. And on the other side of the ball, we have Baker Mayfield. Now, he's got playoff experience. He's played 4 games. He's 2-2. 2 with the Browns, 2 with the Bucks. He's got 10 touchdowns in those games. And he has 100.4 QBR in those games. Baker Mayfield has been able to step up when it comes to the playoffs. And on top of that, he has Mike Evans and Jalen McMillan, who's come out of nowhere to be fantastic. And they're both playing great as of late. And obviously Mike Evans just finished off his 11th straight 1,000-yard season. And if you think about him, he's been to the playoffs now for, 5 consecutive years? All those Brady years that they went to the playoffs, and now 2 straight years with Baker. Now, after hyping up the Bucs offense, what can we expect from the Commanders defense to counteract what is a great receiving duo and Baker, who has shown up in the playoffs? The Commanders were league average. They were ranked 15th in the league. They were average, literally, the definition, in opponents' points per game. But with how well Mike Evans and Jalen McMillan are playing, and how much playoff experience Baker has compared to Jaden Daniels, I think that the Bucs end up winning this game at home. I think they're able to pull it out. I think Baker plays great. I think he's able to limit his mistakes. He has 16 interceptions on the season. I think he's able to limit it. I think he plays smart. And I think ultimately Washington has a really hard time stopping their passing attack. And I also wouldn't be shocked if Jaden has a little bit of growing pains in his first playoff experience. I'll get to my final prediction because we're going to do final predictions a little bit later on. But yes, I do think that the Bucs win the game. Okay, let's move on to Vikings-Rams. This game was moved to Arizona due to the wildfires happening in California, in LA. These two teams played back in October. The Rams beat the Vikings 30-20. The Rams were the only team not named the Lions to beat the Vikings this season. So they have their number, and they have them figured out. At least they did a couple months ago. And it obviously hurts the Rams that they're not going to play in LA. Not that they draw such a rabid fan base when they play in LA, but it's going to be better than what they're able to draw in Arizona, and it makes it a neutral environment where the Vikings fans can pack it in too. Honestly, this game boils down to Sam Darnold. He has the pieces. Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison have both been playing fantastic. And on top of that, the Rams do not have anybody so great at cornerback. It's been a deficiency for them all season. So the question is like this. Is Sam Darnold going to be able to perform enough for the Vikings to win? Or is he going to look more like he did last week when he was missing wide open guys? I think about questioning his ability in high leverage situations, in big time moments against good teams. Is he going to be able to execute, make the throws he needs to make in big games like that? On top of that, I'm very hesitant to bet against Sean McVay. He is getting up there for one of the greatest coaches of all time. You can't deny that. He's been to the Super Bowl twice. He's won it once. And this team has been extremely solid all year. Their offense was phenomenal for the first 15 weeks of the season. Weeks 15 through 17, they scored 12, 19, and 13 points. But that being said, the defense was excellent over that stretch. It was 6, 9, and 9. And so ultimately, I think the Rams are able to figure it out. They're usually an excellent offensive team. Stafford, I think, is going to have a good game. He's going to be able to take advantage of his two great receivers, Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp. I think he figures it out, and I think that they end up winning. Okay, let's run through final picks for the weekend. So running it all the way back, let's rewind. Steelers-Ravens, the Saturday game, the first game of the playoffs. So the line is Ravens minus 9.5. I was having a little bit of a tough time riding with this one. But I did say that the Ravens will blow out the Steelers. I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to take Ravens minus 9.5. Moving on to Chargers-Texans. The line here was Chargers minus 2.5. I'm going to stick with that. I've been hearing so much about how the Chargers are going to choke. But I just think with the injuries for the Texans, it's too much for them to overcome. Chargers minus 2.5. Broncos-Bills. The line is minus 9. I think the Bills have. I do think that the Bills are going to have trouble against the Broncos defense. So I will take the Broncos to cover here, but I still think the Bills win. So if you want to get a little cute, my play for this game would be Broncos plus 9 and the Bills money line. Just if you want to be a little cute. Packers-Eagles. The line's Philly minus 5. Jalen Hurts is expected to play according to reports. He was a full participant in practice yesterday. I always find 5 and 4 to be a funny number. I definitely think that the Eagles will win by at least a touchdown, so let's ride with it. Eagles -5. As I mentioned before, I feel better about the Bucs than I do about the Commanders. So I'm going to take the Bucs +3. The line in Vikings-Rams is Vikings -2. I love the Rams here. It's only 2 points, so I would take the Rams money line in this one. Okay. A couple other things in football I want to talk about. Deion Sanders went on the Barstool podcast, $1 Million Worth Your Game, and he said the only way he'd be willing to coach an NFL team is if both Shedeur Sanders and Shiloh Sanders are on that team. When he was coaching at Jackson State and he was coaching at Colorado, he was able to bring his kids with him. And it added to the flavor of what he was doing. It was a family affair. His other son, Deion Jr., was vlogging. I used to watch those vlogs. It was an entire brand. The football team was barely recognizable as Colorado. It was Prime's team. It was Prime. He has logos with the Colorado coloring. It is the Prime team. And so the question is, what, if any, team would be willing to embrace that same situation where Deion would come in, he would pretty much rebrand the team as Deion's team, as Prime's team, as a Sanders team, and all the spotlight would be on those three. That family. And I'm thinking about it, and I'm saying to myself, the Titans obviously have that opening, and we've spoken about Deion. I said a couple days ago about Deion possibly going there to coach. You have to ask yourself, would the Titans be willing to let Deion go and do that? To let Deion run their organization, essentially. Make all the decisions, make their quarterback untradeable, one of their defensive players untradeable, and frankly, pretty much get rid of a lot of leverage that most football teams have due to the fact that here are these two guys that have to remain with their team. So the thing that I ask myself is this. Would the Titans be willing to do that? I don't know. But is there a team out there that we could think of that maybe makes more sense for this to happen for? And for me, the team that pops right into my head, it's the Dallas Cowboys. It's Deion teaming up with Jerry Jones, who I think is just crazy enough to let Deion come in, run the team, the same way Bill Belichick used to with the Patriots, where he's the GM and the coach. Get behind Shedeur Sanders being unmovable under Deion, and get behind Shiloh Sanders playing and also being unmovable. Now, how would that work out? How would we get Shedeur to the Cowboys, since he is projected to go at least top 2 or 3? I don't know. Could the Cowboys trade up? Maybe they move on from Dak, even after signing him to an extension? I don't know. But just from the perspective of, let's just say, what team could it work with? What team could it be realistic for that to happen? I think that the only team that could happen for is the Cowboys. And so don't get shocked if we start hearing rumblings like that. The last thing I just want to say, going back to college football actually, is that Georgia quarterback Carson Beck decided he's not going to enter the NFL draft, but he's going to enter the transfer portal. A lot of people are saying that he could go to Miami. The first thing that popped into my head is, why not UNC? Why not Bill Belichick, if he stays there, getting one of the best quarterbacks available, moving not so far from Georgia to North Carolina? That makes a lot of sense to me. So let's keep an eye on that too. Okay, let's move on to the NBA. Not much to cover here. The Lakers, they were unsure about the Lakers and Hornets game that was going to take place in LA. That game got postponed. So as was with Rams Vikings and Flames Kings in the NHL, this game is going to be postponed because the fires happening in California, just crazy. So that's the third game now that has been postponed due to the fires in LA. Another story that came out this week was that Amazon Prime is putting together their NBA coverage. They're going to have games starting next season. Remember, the rights deal between TNT and the NBA expired after this year. They did not renew it. That's a whole other story inside the NBA is going to be aired on ESPN. And so Amazon announced that the first big hires that they've made for their coverage is going to be Dirk Nowitzki and Blake Griffin. And the funny thing about this is I feel like every network and every sport now is trying to replicate inside the NBA. So if you watch hockey, you know that the NHL version of Inside the NBA, I forgot exactly what it's called. Maybe it's NHL Tonight, or I'm not exactly sure what they call it. It is a exact replica. It's the exact same thing what they try to do on Inside the NBA. They have Paul Biz. They have him on the panel, which was honestly at the time a kind of crazy hire. He's just you don't know what you're going to get with him. And then you have Henrik Lundqvist and you have Wayne Gretzky, and it's just a crazy compilation of big personalities. And so seemingly that is what Amazon Prime is trying to do with their NBA coverage. So you have Blake Griffin. When you see Blake Griffin and when you hear him speak, he sounds like a pretty reserved guy. But if you follow him a little more closely, you know he is a huge personality. He's done stand-up comedy before. I believe he's done it a bunch of times. And so I think that adding him was a slam dunk hire. I think Dirk's going to be fun. I think he's also been very good with the media. The one thing that struck me when I heard about Dirk doing it is we have so many foreign players now, so many prominent foreign players now. I definitely think it will benefit their coverage having one of the best European players ever on the panel. He'll obviously be able to connect with these players if he's going to do any sort of interviews, and he'll probably be able to provide a different insight than, let's say, Blake Griffin could about Luka, about Giannis, about Wemby. So I think that was also a great hire. But we're going to continue to see, because NBC also got coverage, is getting games, and Amazon Prime. And so we're going to continue to see who gets hired, who goes where. I remember when the NHL moved from NBC to ESPN, it was a big, hoopla. What was going to happen with all the NBC guys? There was such an established coverage at NBC, and now it's interesting to see kind of what's going to be with these TNT guys. Are they going to stay at TNT, cover other sports like Ernie Johnson, or are they going to move on to different networks? Okay, a little bit of another quiet league we had yesterday was the NHL. There was one rumor about JT Miller and Elias Pettersson possibly going to Boston. It was reported that the Bruins are going to be in the mix for them. So just to fill everybody in, these are the two players. I think ultimately you get the feeling that these are going to be the two big the two players that are going to be the big trades at the deadline, and they're on the same team, and they're both two fantastic centers. They're on the Canucks. The funny part is the Canucks are actually a playoff spot right now, but they're looking to turn them into more value. And so yesterday it was reported that the Bruins are in the mix. The Bruins hold the first wild card in the East, but they've been performing tremendously under what they're supposed to be. They're supposed to be a top team in the league. They're not even a top 3 team in their own division. And the funny part is, so the team that has been that JT Miller specifically has mostly been linked to is the Rangers. And if anybody knows, he came up with the Rangers and played a couple seasons there before he was traded to the Lightning. I find it interesting that the two players that the two teams that have been most closely connected to JT Miller and Elias Pettersson are two teams that are pretty much out of it at this point. And I want to say the Bruins are out of it, but they're two teams who are looking to came into the season with sky high expectations, are underperforming tremendously and are looking to get kind of back into the mix. Rangers are 4 points out. As I said, the Bruins are still in a playoff spot. And so here are two teams that are just going to, I think we're at the exact halfway point of the season, and they're going to try to turn their season around and meet the expectations that they initially had coming into the year. All right, let's go on to baseball. So so now it's arbitration season, meaning teams the way it works is teams have young players on their first contracts. They go into years which they're eligible for arbitration, and what teams try to do is avoid arbitration by settling with these players before reaching an arbitrator who will decide what the amount is that the player will be paid for the following season. And so one of the big ones we saw yesterday was Vladimir Guerrero Jr. settling with the Blue Jays on a contract worth $28.5 million. And the reason why it's interesting is because there's been so much speculation around Vlad Guerrero Jr. Remember, the Blue Jays were highly in on Shohei Ohtani last year. They were highly in on Juan Soto this year. They desperately want superstars, and they desperately want to win. And kudos to them. They are really trying their hardest. And I think that Toronto is not a big baseball market, excuse me. But they're really trying. Unlike some other teams, they're really trying to turn that around. And so the question is, so this past year was Shohei Ohtani was the biggest free agent. This year was Juan Soto. And next year, presumably, the big free agent will be Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And so the funny thing to think about here is, are the Blue Jays going to be able to keep their own guy? Some people suspect that they might try to trade him now. I just want to point out one side point. Just because they settle in arbitration, anybody who settles in arbitration does not take them out of the running for a trade candidate. They could still very much be traded. And so do the Blue Jays want to recoup value now if they don't think they can re-sign Vladdy next offseason? The question from Vladdy's perspective is, we are now seeing a different market when it comes to first baseman. Christian Walker, Paul Goldschmidt, Carlos Santana, they all got small amount of years, a short-term deal, and not a lot of money. Teams in 2024, 2025, as it stands today, they do not value first baseman as much as they used to. And this is illustrated probably mostly by the fact that Pete Alonso is still a free agent, and there's not much interest in him. Let's just give context about what Pete Alonso is. I saw a stat yesterday. I was given a stat by a good friend of mine that Pete Alonso is fourth all time for home runs per 162 games. Over 40. That's what we're talking about here. We're talking about, and the players on the list, it's Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton, Babe Ruth, Shohei Ohtani. Literal generational players. And Pete Alonso's on that list. And look what he's doing this offseason. It is January 10th. He is still waiting for a contract. And there's essentially one real team interested in him, and it's just the Mets. And they're going to wait him out. Now, the difference is, Vladdy is going to be 25 next offseason. So even if you give him, let's say, an 8-year deal, that's into his age 33 season. So maybe teams will be a little bit more willing to sign him to a longer deal. And they probably will be. But from Vladdy's perspective, he has to be thinking that this does not bode well for him. It's going to be so interesting to see that after all this narrative about first baseman not being a smart investment, it is going to be fascinating to see how Vladdy is handled next offseason. Vladdy is a 165 plus OPS plus player. He has 7 WAR potential. This is the kind of guy we're talking about. He is a top, when he's going good, he's a top 5 player in baseball. But the question is here, how much will age be a factor? And how much will the presumption around first baseman, free agents, how much will that play a factor? What kind of teams will be interested in him? I think the Yankees will 1,000% be interested in him. That's why they signed Paul Goldschmidt to a 1-year deal. I think that they're going to go hard after Vladdy. And that what they're going to try to do is replace Juan Soto in the lineup with Vladdy. I think the Red Sox are going to be on him. It's going to be all the usual suspects. The Red Sox, who have also been heavy, who are super heavy in on Juan Soto. I think the Mets will be in on him, even if they sign Pete. Because if they sign Pete, it's going to be to a 3 or 4 year deal. They'll say, hey, let's just put Pete at DH for the next 2 or 3 years. And then clearly the Blue Jays will. And I do think, similar to what the Mets did this offseason with Juan Soto, where they were not going to get outbid, I truly think the Blue Jays will not get outbid. And I think that Vladdy is going to stay with the Blue Jays. I think he will be a Blue Jay for life. The one other thing that kind of puts a wrinkle in it is that, remember, the Cubs just traded for Kyle Tucker. He has 1 year left on his deal. So those are going to be the top 2 free agents. But you have a left fielder who is a solid left fielder and is an excellent baseball player, one of the best hitters in the league. He's also going to be a free agent. So it's going to be interesting to see how those two kind of play off of each other. Does Kyle Tucker being a free agent take away leverage for Vladdy? Left field's a more valuable position than first base. Next offseason is going to be a very interesting one, for sure. All right, that's it. Monday, we're going to have NFL wildcard games to recap. We'll have Ohio State, Ohio State. Maybe I just, by mistake, leaked the script. We're going to have Ohio State and Texas recap. And hopefully we have some more stories. Have a great weekend. This was Early Game Podcast. Subscribe on YouTube. Follow on Spotify. Follow on X. Comment, like, subscribe, do all that stuff. Have a fantastic weekend.